to vote. It's not automatic anymore because the association is voluntary. And voting is next week, Tuesday through Thursday. Go to wpausa.ausa.auckland.ac.nz for more details. Right, so I've got Selwyn Manning on the line. This week we're talking spying. It's been alleged that a Canadian Naval Intelligence Officer, Sub-Lieutenant Jeffrey Delisle, I think I got the pronunciation right there, passed on secrets to the Russians. Some of the info was about the New Zealand Defence Force. Selwyn, it's early days, but what do we know about what's been revealed to the Russians?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of speculation around it, but what we do know, as you put it in that way, that the information that was gleaned through the Echelon network was included within the intelligence information that this man had access to. So one can glean that from that, the alleged actions of the guy in passing on intelligence, top security intelligence information to Russian individuals would include stuff like how Echelon works, the kind of communications and signals it's trawling, what it happens to that information once it gets back to the various motherships of the security agencies.
And we're talking about, it's commonly known as the Five Eyes, is that correct?
Yeah, that's one of the colloquial kind of terms for this, and what it is basically the Five Eyes includes the United States, Canada, Britain, Australia and New Zealand, and the Echelon network, which Nicky Hager busted realisation that it existed all those years ago, is a part of that Five Eyes network.
So the Echelon network it's basically signals intelligence, which is eavesdropping conversations and data transfers.
Yes.
What sort of things in the goodie bag would the Russians be interested in?
Well, there would be a strategic kind of value to how the Western Alliance, including the Five Eyes network, goes about getting intelligence itself. Secondly, the tactics it uses to get that, how it applies that information once it has it all there, how it data mines it, I suppose is another way of putting it. It would be things like how effective it is in mapping where the Russian fleet is in the Pacific, for example, on our patch. Likewise with where the Chinese naval fleet and its submarine fleet is in the South Pacific on our patch. It would be looking at those types of things, whether or not we, as a Western Alliance, have interest in where the French have their naval fleet and their submarine fleets, all of that type of thing, and how it is applied in the analytical sense. So how that information, once it's data mined, is exported to the decision makers within the intelligence apparatus. All of those kind of things would obviously have a value, particularly in a military intelligence sense, to the Russians.
Just how much information would a junior officer, such as the sub-lieutenant, have?
Well, this is the big question. It appears from what is out in the public arena now that he did indeed have access to significant top-level clearance security intelligence information. So that would suggest not just the raw data, but certainly that would be, has gone through the various analytical tools. So it would be the high-end area. Also, because he was in very much a mothership type of position in Ottawa, and certainly in the joint operations area, which that includes, I should say, more than just military intelligence, then he was in a position where he was obviously highly valuable. At the moment, the man is approaching a public trial under the Security Intelligence Acts in Canada. If it's proven to be the case, of course, then one could imagine that there is a lot of evaluation on the vulnerabilities that exist in the Canadian system that allowed this to take place. And certainly it's an embarrassing situation for Canada at the moment, Simon.
Is our security system modelled on the same way as the Canadian system? Is there structural problems here that we should be worried about?
Yeah, I think in recent years first off, yes, ours maps very closely actually the structure that Canada has as an intelligence framework, and secondly, we should be, if you buy into the security intelligence kind of the importance of it being top secret and secure, well then, New Zealand needs to really have a closer look and once again a re-evaluation of its own security vetting and its processes, etc. We just have to look back to 2010, 2011 when the Stephen Wilkes affair became known, and just to refresh listeners' memory on that, Stephen Wilkes, he bluffed his way into a top job with chief defence scientist and director of defence technology agencies in New Zealand Defence back in the later 2000s. The State Services Commission looked into how he got through, because he was found, thanks to a Eugene Bigham investigation via 60 Minutes on 3 News, he was found to have his CV was dotted with untruths that got him the job. Now, the State Services Commissioner looked into it, that's Ian Rennie, and one of the comments he made in the subsequent report was the failure by New Zealand SIS staff to record critical information about Mr. Wilkes' character and pass it through the vetting file at this early juncture of Mr. Wilkes' employment with NZ Defence was significant. And what it's doing is it's highlighting a vulnerability. And of course there's another one too, Simon. The WikiLeaks in December 2010 revealed senior defence official was providing the US Embassy with New Zealand government cabinet information. Now, cabinet papers are highly classified here, even to the point where they're put in safes, every night in the beehive so that they don't get leaked out. Now, somebody in New Zealand Defence at a top level was passing on that information to the American Embassy, and that came out via the WikiLeaks cable, where the US Embassy was sending back to Washington, stating this information that it was acquiring through this means. Now, I've got to say that while the Stephen Wilkes thing was investigated by the State Services Commission, the State Services Commissioner, Ian Rennie, nor the State Services Minister, Tony Ryle, instigated a public investigation into that major breach of cabinet confidential papers.
There seems to, finally today, there seems to be an issue around character here. Now, Wilkes, from my perspective, seems to be a guy who just wanted a job. He just wanted to get paid. This Canadian guy, first of all, we don't know if he is actually a spy, but if he was a spy, why did he do it? And it points to what he would be prepared to divulge or betray for what.
Well, with the Canadian thing, it's alleged that he was paid by the Russians for the information. With Wilkes, what that does here in New Zealand is it underlined a vulnerability where a person was in a top job with access to top secret information, not just including New Zealand intelligence, but broader than that, where he had ghosts in the closet, he skeletons in the closet. He didn't want people to know that he was a fraudster or a fantasist, as some would say. Now, with that, news media were able to find that was the case and bring that out into the public arena without the authorities really knowing much about it. Now, imagine if you were looking for a weak cog in the wheel and you represented Russia or another major power around the world, and you looked at the Five Eyes network and you saw New Zealand sitting there, just like Canada perhaps with its vulnerabilities, and you started looking at people in these top kind of areas and you found somebody had a few ghosts there. Now, you could apply the pressure on that person like a blackmail type of situation to exploit their vulnerabilities. And that's the danger that New Zealand was in when it discovered it had a Wilkes type character in its midst. One would imagine that behind the scenes major investigations had gone on to try and wheedle out anyone else of that ilk, but it certainly existed only a couple of years ago. With the thing that mentioned on, that WikiLeaks cables revealed relating to this major breach from our New Zealand Defence Force, a top official there providing the Americans with top secret information from Cabinet. Well, there was no investigation, so we don't even know who the person was, only that that person existed. And imagine the hoo-ha there would be if that information was being provided to the Chinese, the People's Republic of China.
Yeah, there's nothing like a bit of Russian spying to wake everybody up. It sort of brings us Cold War Part 2, maybe. So thanks for your time today. That's all the time we've got, unfortunately, and we will talk to you next week.
Okay, Simon, take care.
All right, you too.
Our Wire.
That was Selwyn Manning from livenews.co.nz talking about the Canadian, or the alleged Canadian spy that's just been arrested and his alleged links to leaking information about our own defence forces.